NFL games that actually mean something, Cody.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually had one on Thursday, which was the Bills and Rams. And, the Rams kind of played like the Lambs.
Yeah.
And the Bills played like the Bills. I mean, they played really well. So, kind of a few things that you kind of took from, I don't know if you watched the whole game. I was able to because if you're new to the show, my in-laws are big Rams fans. So, we watch all the Rams games. So I definitely watch a lot of Rams and Raiders. I was watching the whole game. We all got together and watched it. And I don't know if you watched it all, but what were some of the things that you took from that game?
So I did watch about 80% of it. I think I missed half of the first quarter, but I was able to watch the rest of the game. And my takeaway was in the first half, the Rams were very competitive. The Bills started off a little well, I wouldn't say they started off slow, but they were able to move down the field. They had some costly turnovers early on, and the Rams, didn't move down the field as much as I thought they would. And honestly, you can tell that Stafford was only targeting Cooper Kupp, which, he's a dynamite receiver. It looks like he picked right where he left off last season, but what makes it tough is, you and I have been on the train of Allen Robinson II, and he was nowhere to be found. Cam Akers had 3 carries for zilch yards, and I don't even think he was targeted. Darrell Henderson Jr. Seemed to be the only running back that was productive. So it was just very surprising. I think the Bills defense is, was able to get to Stafford quite often. I think 7 sacks. So the Rams have an offensive line problem, and they did have it for a majority of last season. They were just able to cover it up. And it was just very apparent in this first week. So I know that there's a lot of, overreacting on the following day of, the Rams and the Bills. And the Bills do look like a great football team. They look very, very good. But it is 1 week. The Rams just didn't play their best brand of football. I trust Sean McVay will bounce back and the Rams will be just fine. But yeah, I mean, the offensive line needs to be worked on. This is kind of like the first full game. I think that whole offensive unit got to play on the field together. So there's a lot of trying to get the feel for each other. You can tell there's just a lot of cohesion that's not complete there. And the Bills, obviously, they've been together a lot longer. You can tell that there's a lot more chemistry there. They had a lot more trust in one another on both sides of the ball. So I think, I think I was surprised by how dominant the Bills were, but I mean, Bills are AFC favorites for a majority of people this season. So we'll see. I mean, it was good to see football back on, but we'll see how the rest of the season plays out.
Yeah, I was a little mad at myself for not really doing my homework in the sense of I knew Andrew Whitworth was not on the offensive line for the Rams anymore, and I think that's a huge blow. I mean, he was their anchor on the offensive line. One of the best left tackles, even at 40 years old in the NFL. I mean, he was absolutely phenomenal. And so losing that, you lost a lot. And I mean, Von Miller definitely showed why you missed that in that game. The one thing that I did that I was very impressed with the Bills is all their sacks were coming off of a 4-man rush. It wasn't even blitzes. Yeah. Von Miller was beating his man quite a bit. I forget the other guy. I think it's Phillips on the other side, who got to Phillips. He got a sack and a half. He was on the other side of Miller, so it was just a great 1-2 punch for the Bills. So very impressed, very discouraged by the Rams offensive line. I mean, you were talking about Darrell Henderson Jr., and he was the most productive running back that the Rams had. But to say he was productive is kind of being nice because in 13 carries, 47 yards, I mean, he was barely – I mean, his longest run was an 18-yarder. If it wasn't for that, he's in the 20s, in the high 20s of rushing yards. So,
and I think he had 5 receptions, which made it look like it was a little bit better, but a lot of them were dump-offs, just to elude pressure. So
5 catches, 26 yards. So, listen, I like Darrell Henderson Jr. I'm with you. I think Cam Akers, Something must have happened. There must have been something that was going on because it was really weird why he only had 3 carries. I thought he had 1 catch, but I forgot that it was a pass that was kind of behind the line of scrimmage or behind the quarterback, so technically it was just a lateral, so it was a handoff. Yeah, I mean, they really didn't throw him. And then Allen Robinson, I mean, the shock to me was he was targeted twice. I mean, which is ridiculous. I mean, Allen Robinson, you're spending what is he guaranteed? Like $50-60 million guaranteed.
Yeah,
and
something like that.
He's not even getting schemed in this game. That was a little weird to me. I was very surprised about that. So that's something that honestly I'm going to keep an eye on, not just for fantasy purposes, of course, but mainly because that could be a big story. I mean, that could be something where if you're Allen Robinson, I mean, you may be okay with the money, which I mean, I'm sure you are, but if you're a competitor, if you're a guy who wants to win, that's not going to be okay because you could have been getting paid just as much in Chicago and losing games, you know what I mean? And getting targeted way more. That was a little weird to me. Tyler Higbee had an awful game.
Yeah.
He dropped like 2 or 3 passes, which were just, I mean, easy catches.
Momentum killers too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and Cooper Kupp, obviously he did his thing. And I think if you're a fantasy football player, I mean, you're definitely you definitely are happy if you got Cooper Kupp. You're definitely happy that, and I think now if someone took Cooper Kupp first overall, you showed why that's a smart pick. I mean, he had a touchdown, which was a toe tapper, which was beautiful. 13 catches, 128 yards. I mean, he was the one that was being targeted the most. So we'll see what happens. I mean, Stafford looked really bad, really, really bad, and I don't know if it was his arm. His arm didn't look bad, but what I saw was it was a lot of dump offs. It was a lot of short passes. It was a lot of not going past 15-yard passes. I mean, he was throwing pretty
conservatively.
Conservatively, I guess would be the best word. So Josh Allen, I mean, you saw on the other foot. I mean, he's letting it rip. He's letting it go. He's throwing downfield. He had the 2 picks, which were kind of like weird picks. I mean, you could blame him all you want, but he powered his way in for a rushing touchdown and had one heck of a stiff arm. I mean, it was crazy. So, I mean, you could just tell that Josh Allen was the best player on the field. And Cooper Kupp was definitely a close second, in my opinion. And Stephon Diggs kind of made it almost a 3-way tie there. So, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens. But a lot of good things with Buffalo, and I think the score 31-10 could have been a whole lot worse if it wasn't for all the Buffalo turnovers. If they didn't turn the ball over, they were moving the ball at will against Los Angeles, which was another concern for me. Jalen Ramsey allowed a perfect passer rating when the ball was going towards him. So a lot of concerns, but I am with you. I think it's an overreaction to be like, oh my God, the Rams, they're going to be awful. They're terrible. Listen, it was game 1, and it's a lot of new faces. We forget that, they were Super Bowl champions. They don't have the same team that they had last year. Because we thought that Tampa Bay was going to repeat because they had literally the same exact team. So we're like, well, what's new? What's going to change? Well, other teams changed and they got better. And so with Los Angeles, I would still say I feel like they got better on the sense of the offense. They got better in weapons form, but offensive line and defense, they did lose a lot, and we're starting to see that a little bit. So we'll see how. I believe they're going to get out of their funk. I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue. But I could see how it could end up being that way. So it is something to watch. But honestly, I'm not worried about it because I do feel like the Rams are that talented of a team, and Sean McVay has proven time and time again. He's a guy who figures it out. So
yeah. For the Rams, I'd be more concerned with the defense than I would the offense. I think if the defense can make a couple more stops, and I think you mentioned this to me earlier this morning too when we were talking, is Von Miller, ironically, was that pass rusher that was opposite of Leonard Floyd, who, he made his best opportunities when he had another pass rusher on the opposite side of him. And they don't have that. They have Bobby Wagner, who's still getting used to the defense, it looks like. Jalen Ramsey, for some reason, just didn't have a very good game. I imagine he'll bounce back. He's a competitor. I don't see him turning any worse than he did. I mean, he gave up, I think, like 126 yards total when he was targeted. So I don't think it gets any worse than that. But I definitely think that if they can just address the defense, get home a little bit more often and just don't give up too many plays behind them, I think that they'll be okay. What doesn't help, too, is that a lot of the turnovers that the Rams had were momentum killers. And Tyler Higbee, I can't stress enough, those 3 drops were huge momentum. Like, he converts, like I told you, 2 out of those 3 catches, and they move the chains, and they have better opportunity to get other players involved or to get better momentum, and they just couldn't. So stuff like that, is tough to see. It is one game, like you mentioned. So, thank God for football being back.
Yeah. Another stat that actually was a little that I think actually means a lot. So both quarterbacks got sacked. Obviously, Matthew Stafford was sacked more. He was sacked 7 times in this game. Josh Allen was only sacked twice. But it's the yardage where they lost, which is a little like, okay, that's kind of a big thing too. And that could be not only a momentum killer, but pretty much just like throw everything that you were going to do on this drive out the window. You just got to try and make up yards and maybe make it a better punt or make it possibly where you can end up being, close to scoring points, whether it be a field goal or a touchdown.
Yeah.
Matthew Stafford was sacked 7 times for 49 yards. So basically 50 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen was sacked twice. He only lost 5 yards. So when he's getting sacked, he's only losing 2 yards as well. But with Matthew Stafford, he's losing 7 yards every time he's getting sacked. I mean, that's huge.
That takes you out of field goal range.
Yeah, that's the difference between a 2nd and 12 and a 2nd and 17. That's big. I mean, in football, it doesn't seem like it when you think of math. You're like, I mean, it's only a 5-yard difference, but it really is a big thing when you talk about football because, what you can do on 2nd and 12, you can basically stick to your game plan. You just got to make sure you get a couple extra yards. When you're on 2nd and 17, you basically have to be like, okay, well, we were going to run on 2nd down, so we're just going to throw it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that's a huge stat and, contributed to a lot of what was happening with the Rams.
Yeah, I agree.